Today's test brings us to the beginning of the commercial crew program. A commercial crew program which will raise our occupancy on the U.S. segment of the space station to 4 astronauts. And that fourth astronaut comes as a real premium to doing research. Comes as a real premium to doing research on the space station. The tasks don't get particularly more intensive to do systems and maintenance. So that fourth astronaut, that time becomes dedicated to performing more science. In fact, enough time that it will essentially double the amount of crew time we have to perform experiments on board station. The return to U.S. soil also brings us the ability to return samples more quickly and get human samples back down to the ground.
Kurt, you're talking about all this great research. You're talking about scientific experiments. But what would you say to someone who's watching this and thinking, this isn't relevant to me. I'm never going to space. I don't do science. What do you say to those people?
Well, again, one of the focuses is on the ISS benefits for humanity. And for all of us who've been stuck at home during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been wondering, wouldn't it be nice to have more bandwidth? Why does the internet slow down? Some of the research we're doing on board Space Station, particularly in the Z-band optical fiber, is using the fact that we don't have sedimentation in a microgravity environment to develop new materials that will help us build more perfect fiber optic cables, which will allow us for better bandwidth, implementing and lower costs in implementing networks here on Earth. And then if you're not really a tech geek, maybe your interests lie more in human health. And then we have multiple experiments going on to help us develop new drugs, new treatments on board the ISS. Pharmaceutical companies are working on methods that allow us to crystallize proteins in space in a more purified and more standardized method. And this could lead to monoclonal antibody suspensions that we can treat through injection instead of a painful infusion. We also are developing our capability to studies into our capability to produce tissues and organs in space. Again, because you don't have sedimentation, there's a capability there to produce more realistic tissues that can someday possibly be used to prevent.
Now, Kurt, I know they have some cargo going up with them. But I understand they plan to bring some science back.
That's right, Gary. A lot of their cargo going up with them are crew supplies and EVA supplies to support them if they have to do EVAs on board. But the cargo they'll be bringing down is science, and it comes from across the spectrum. We have student experiments in seeds that will be returning with the Crew Dragon. We also have a number of experiments that are dependent on their samples returning in frozen lockers on board the SpaceX Dragon to be able to do the science there. Those include rodent research tissues from the National Lab Rodent Research 17 mission, and also our veggie experiments, which are experiments in growing plants in space that will be needed when we go to more distant locations like the Moon and Mars.
International Space Station Chief Scientist Kurt Costello, thank you so much for your time. Let's hear now from one of the next astronauts to fly to station on a Crew Dragon, talking with Marina Jurica. Marina.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be a part of today's momentous launch. My guest is no stranger to the International Space Station and will return there for the first time in nearly a decade for his third space flight with the Crew 1 launch expected later this year. Having logged 177 days in space from flights on the Space Shuttle Discovery to the Soyuz, JAXA astronaut Soichi Noguchi will have spent more time in space than any of his other crewmates. It is my pleasure to welcome him here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Soichi. Honjitsu wa arigato gozaimasu.
Wow, that's wonderful. Marina, how are you doing? Thanks for having me today. This is wonderful. Today we are celebrating the launch, so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here with us. I am sure you have felt the excitement for today's launch, Soichi, and you will be on the next Crew Dragon flight after this one. Are you excited to launch from Kennedy Space Center again, and how are you preparing for this new vehicle?
Yes, definitely we are excited to go back to Kennedy Space Center. My first space flight was from Kennedy Space Center on the Spatial Discovery. That was 15 years ago, but my memory is still fresh. I still feel the vibration of the launch, the same launch pad of 39A that the demo to go up, and the same launch pad that we will go up as a Crew 1. And our crew is getting ready for the final training phase, which will come in the coming weeks. And the mood is really high, and we are ready to go up.
And as you know, the International Space Station and space exploration is an international effort. How do you feel representing the Japanese Space Agency once again on the ISS?
Well, I think the strengths of the International Space Station is the diversity of all the participating countries, and adding diversity is definitely gives a rigidity to the program. And the same applies to our Crew 1. Our Crew 1, we are 4 of us, but quite a different background, quite a different ethnicity, and definitely the diversity is the key word of our success to the Crew 1.
And I'm sure it will be very successful. What are you looking forward to once you get back to the ISS?
Well, this will be my 3rd visit to the International Space Station. I'd like to see the things my colleagues keep saying, hey, you got to visit the space station again because it's getting more comfortable, more roomy, and I cannot wait to go back to my sleep station after 10 years.
And nothing beats that view, does it?
Oh, definitely. My last flight, we actually installed a big window called the cupola, and that was a big hit, obviously. This is the #1 leisure time for astronauts, and I'm ready to shoot as many photos as I can this time as well.
Amazing. I will look forward to seeing those photos. I'm sure you remember exactly what it feels like in these moments right before a launch. What do you think Robert Behnken and Douglas Hurley are feeling right now as they prepare to head to the ISS?
Well, Doug and Bob's space shuttle veterans, they know the drill. They have launched, they experienced the launch before. So I think they're pretty relaxed. And so far through my training, I learned that most of the steps before the launch is quite similar to what we have in the space shuttle days. So, different suit.
Did he say
different
space
vehicle,
shuttle with
but,
AIDS?
all the necessity steps to go up into the capsule should. So far through my training, I learned that most of the steps before the launch is quite similar to what we have in the space shuttle days. So, different suit,
Space
different
shuttle with
vehicle,
AIDS, bro.
but all the necessities. Domo arigato, and we'll both enjoy the beautiful lunch today. Thank you very much for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good luck with your launch later this year. And as the excitement builds towards launch, I will send it back to you.
Thank you, Marina. I now have the distinct pleasure of being joined by one of NASA's record-setting astronauts and a recent resident aboard the International Space Station, Christina Cook. Christina, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Dan.
I wonder what that
Christina, we're coming up on 20 years of continuous human presence on the space station, and you were one of those humans. What's it like to see a new milestone like this launch unfold after so much history already?
So much history indeed. It is really just such a testament to NASA. Not only are we pushing the boundaries of knowledge and discovery and exploration, but we're pushing the boundaries on how we accomplish that mission. We're bringing in commercial partners. We're fostering a space economy. So we're making sure that we're always pushing forward, always taking that next step.
Level.
I think it's such a privilege to be part of an organization that recognizes if we're not actually making steps and innovating every single time we do this, then we're not truly answering humanity's call to explore and to push those boundaries.
You know she's reading
Christina, I know Bob and Doug are veterans themselves, but what advice do you have for Bob and Doug, given your experience as a long-duration station crew member?
Well, being able to live on board the International Space Station and work there is just such a privilege. You know, you're a steward of this amazing laboratory that's bringing so many benefits down to Earth and also learning how we can push farther into the universe. So it is quite an honor, and I think that's the main thing about how it feels to be up there for a long duration. You know, in terms of advice, Bob and Doug have been great mentors for me. They've given me advice for so many years. It's strange to be the one who could be in a position to offer them anything. But I would say that as, you know, shuttle flyers, they used to to participate in missions that were really, really intense, go, go, go all the time. Long-duration space flight is more of a marathon than a sprint, so I would tell them to take that moment, enjoy it, and, you know, really welcome the opportunity to have part of your mission be taking it all in and sharing that with the people that got you there.
Thanks again, Christina. Always a pleasure to hear from you, and fantastic words. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So once again, once Bob and Doug arrive at the station, they'll be greeted by astronaut Chris Cassidy. But before we do that, let's toss to a briefing.
Hello, everyone. I'm astronaut Chris Cassidy, commander of Expedition 63 on board the International Space Station, flying 250 miles above the Earth. Like you, I'm excited about today's launch and the possibilities it will bring to America and to the world. But also, I'm very excited that two close friends will be arriving and joining the crew. I had the privilege of flying with Doug Hurley on both of our first shuttle missions back in 2009. Together, we came to the International Space Station and helped construct the amazing facility that it is today. Although this will be my first mission with Bob, it was my honor to follow him as the chief of the office when he left back in 2015 to begin training for this amazing mission. Personally, I've been very fortunate to fly in two different spacecraft. Launching from America on the shuttle, and most recently launching from Kazakhstan in the Soyuz. But I can't tell you how exciting it is to know that we're once again launching Americans from the coast of Florida. And finally, here's a story I'd like to share with you. Back in 1981, John Young and Bob Crippen launched on Space Shuttle Columbia, the very first space shuttle flight, marking the last time we flew Americans on a brand new vehicle. With them, they flew an American flag, representing America's technical prowess. 30 years later, that same flag was flown to the International Space Station. This flag remains here today, waiting for Bob and Doug. Our flag means so many things to our country, and this small piece of America represents what we'll be able to achieve together. We'll never stop exploring. And so Bob and Doug can take this very special flag home to Earth, where it awaits its next journey to the cosmos. In a few years, the first Orion crew will take this flag with it around the moon. All of this starts today. I'll be watching outside the window along with everyone else in America and around the world. I can't wait to look out the window and see my friends on close approach. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and go Bob and Doug. I'll see you soon.
And that was a very special message from NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy, right now the lone American aboard the International Space Station, so he will be ready and waiting to welcome, share with you just how much has happened here at Kennedy Space.
You know, the vice president was there, Elon was there, the crew families was there, and of course Bob, myself, and the rest of the center leadership was there to cheer them on. But then, you know, when they came out and then they went to the families, and Bob Benkin said, "Virtual hug," and he shouted out, "Virtual hug," and he did this motion, and of course his child also did that virtual hug, and so I guess that's the tradition of doing a virtual hug with the families. And then they, you know, then they walked and got in the Tesla, either side, and the family walked right up to the window of the Tesla and were talking, you know, having a private last moment with their father, hand on the window. It was very emotional. I had tears in my eyes. I don't know how many other people had tears in their eyes, but it was really a special, emotional moment, and everybody was, of course, wishing them well. A lot of I love yous, a lot of Godspeeds, a lot of Ad Astra, you know, take care, all of that. So it was very special.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And in the Tell me about that time and how far we've come.
Yeah, so as you note, it was the end of a very iconic program. The Space Shuttle program. So 135 flights, all of them launching from Launch Complex 39, many from 39A, where we're going to be launching from today, and then returning back, you know, at the shuttle landing facility. Those two iconic sonic booms was something that all along the Space Coast people really resonated with, really felt in their hearts and looked forward to. So it was a very sad time, but I will tell you that 30-year program, we had planned for it. The workforce was incredible. You know, there was a lot of people who, as I said, spent their entire career here, and they wanted to safely fly that shuttle out, and then they retired. There was also another large group of people that just wanted to put on their resume that they had been privileged to work on the space shuttle. So the workforce I was incredibly proud of, because they were resilient, they were dedicated, they were committed to safely flying out that shuttle. They didn't skip any steps, and regardless, as you said, that they knew they were getting their layoff notices. I think it landed on a Wednesday. They were getting their layoff notice on a Friday. They were in it till the end to make sure we safely flew it out. And of course, you know, we had 14,000 workers out here then, which we have a lot fewer here today. And of course, our guest operations, you remember those last shuttle flights, everybody around the country wanted to be a part of.
Astronauts, but someday for the general public as well.
From the beginning, it has been our mission at SpaceX to help make humanity a multiplanetary species. And today's mission is an important step towards that goal. The key to opening up space access for people like you and me is reusability. Without it, traveling to space is just far too expensive for the average person to do. Imagine how expensive a flight from LA to New York would be if you had to throw the plane away after a single trip.
A lot.
Yeah, exactly. That ticket would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and almost no one could ever afford to fly. Both the Dragon spacecraft and the Falcon 9 rocket are designed to be reusable, which not only improves the reliability of the vehicles in that they're flight proven again and again, but it also drives down cost. This is essential to enabling not just a handful of people, but rather hundreds of thousands of people to get out there and to explore the moon, Mars, beyond. And I, for one, it is my dream to visit Jupiter's ocean moon, Europa. Leland, you're one of the lucky Earthlings that's had the opportunity to get off the planet and go explore. Where would you like to go next?
You know, Lauren, I think I would like to go to Mars and, be there for, about a year each way and then a year on the Martian surface. But the one condition I would have to have, my pups would have to go with me because it's about exploring new places, but taking your family with you. We have these crewmates that are people that you get to know and love, over a course of training, but it's nothing like having your family with you. And I think that's something that we're going to be seeing in the future, people living and working on other planets as a family.
I think there are a lot of people who want to see your dogs with you in space.
Well, we've seen them in an official portrait. I know that the dogs came in with you to take a picture in your spacesuit back in the day.
Yeah,
it is.
Well, we kind of snuck them in. No dogs allowed at NASA.
Well, they had their moment.
They sure did.
And knowing that the opportunity to fly to space as a private citizen or a private dog maybe one day is right around the corner, we have a new poll question on Twitter for you. So if you were given the opportunity, would you travel to space? Let us know, and we'll share the results a little bit later.
All stations come
All right. Well, there is not a lot of cargo.
Chief Engineer and Technical Poll for launch escape arming and propellant loop.
All right. Now, while there's not a lot of cargo in today's mission, Dragon is carrying 2 special payloads, aside from Bob and Doug, of course. The first is a series of custom art pieces entitled Humankind by Los Angeles artist Tristan Eaton. These indestructible, double-sided paintings are made from gold, brass, and aluminum, and they celebrate how far humanity has come, as well as how far we still have to go. It includes a beautiful homage to the Saturn V rocket, as well as a nod to Bob and Doug's current ride to space. You can find more images and information about these pieces on SpaceX's social channels.
An hour going around the planet every 90 minutes. And when I think of that perspective shift that I got looking out the window, flying over my hometown, flying over Leo's hometown in Paris, flying over Yuri's hometown in Russia, it brought us all together as a civilization. And I think that's what spaceflight does for us. The more people that have the opportunity to go to space will feel like it's an international family of people working together for the good of humanity and all humankind.
Absolutely, and it's exactly what that piece of art was all about.
Yeah. And following today's mission, we will be one step closer to a future where we can all have that experience. We can all have that orbital perspective and the ability to explore new worlds. In just over an hour from now, Bob and Doug will be the first people to launch on an American vehicle in almost a decade. For the team at SpaceX, it's really hard to put into words how honored we feel about the trust that Bob, Doug, and NASA have put into our team to carry out this critical mission. I worked on Crew Dragon for 2 years, and I can just imagine what all of my friends and colleagues are thinking right now as they sit in anticipation and excitement for what's to come.
Absolutely. And speaking of those who have carried the hopes and dreams of science and exploration, we have a few shout outs to share with you from some big fans of NASA and SpaceX.
Wow, we're making history again. The NASA program. I am there with you guys in spirit. Bob, Doug, good luck. I know you'll be fine. I'll be watching and got everything crossed, arms, legs. I'm tied in a knot. Can't wait for you to get back safely.
This is the first time a U.S.-built rocket has taken people into space in 9 years. It's quite an accomplishment. So for us at
crossed, arms, legs. I'm tied in a knot. Can't wait for you to get back safely.
This is the first time a U.S.-built rocket has taken people into space in 9 years. It's quite an accomplishment. So for us at the Planetary Society, more rockets means more exploration. More people in space means more exploration. More countries involved in the endeavor of spaceflight means more exploration. This is how we know the cosmos and our place within it. So congratulations, SpaceX. Here's wishing your team, and the crew especially, a safe journey and the joy of discovery. Let's go.
Atlantis. We really worked hard for that. We've worked with our SpaceX partners and our Boeing partners, and here we are. Today's the day. We're taking that first step in this new era.
What do you remember most about launch day for STS-135?
Today's Atlantis. We really worked hard on that
launch day.
Step.
For STS-135?
I think it was just you felt the weight of it. The space shuttle was a storied program, 135 flights, and thousands of people had poured their lives into this program to launch probes to the planets, to launch the Hubble Space Telescope, and then, of course, to build the International Space Station. So you knew the incredible accomplishments of this program, and so you wanted to finish strong. And then when it finally became launch day, you'd finished the studying, you'd worked really hard, and now it was time to kind of soak it in. And I think that's what Bob and Doug are doing right now. They're sitting on the vehicle, talking to each other, listening to the sounds, and feeling the vibrations as it starts up. And it's going to be a great experience for them.
Hi, Rex. What is your take?
Great experience for them. And it's going to be a great experience for them.
Hi, Rex. What is your take on private astronauts going to space?
Thanks, Marie. We're just an hour and 13 minutes away from launch, and things are really getting ready to pick up here. Since arriving at the spacecraft, Bob and Doug were helped by our closeout engineers to get into their seats, attach their suits to special umbilicals that provide breathing air, pressurized nitrox, and a communication link to Dragon systems. They conducted leak checks, which were successful, and communications checks with the Corps here in Hawthorne, which is the person who will speak to them directly throughout the entire mission, as well as the launch director in Florida. This is where they are checking their comm path through both ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites that we'll use to talk to the crew the entire way to the station.
That's right, and after those suit checks were complete, the closeout team was able to seal up the hatch, which also got its own leak check, and we confirmed that it was good to go. The closeout team at this point has already departed the area around the pad. They're about 25 minutes ahead of their schedule. And right now, weather operators are kicking off their final check on wind speeds at the pad, which are going to be used, and they're really important for that final go, no-go for launch. Before we get to that final go, no-go, various teams at both NASA and SpaceX are going to do some internal go polls, just making sure conditions are good. Falcon 9, the Dragon, the crew, the range, and the space station before the final go is given. So let's check back in with Houston real quick for a status on the team there supporting the space station on their readiness for launch.
In Mission Control Houston, led by Flight Director Zeb Scoville, has been polled, and we're go for launch. All systems on board the station that are required to be healthy for the mission are reported good, and we're standing by. Station power and communication systems are looking healthy. Life support systems and thermal conditions are normal, and the trajectory is right on track to ensure that Dragon's flight will meet right up with the orbiting complex as planned. Chris Cassidy aboard the International Space Station is finishing up some tasks, going into his pre-sleep period, and will be able to watch the launch of Bob and Doug. Mission Control Houston will largely be in a monitor mode for the first 18 hours of the flight, with the team here really jumping into the mix tomorrow when Dragon gets in range of the International Space Station and we begin integrated operations. So I'll send it back. Everything's green on our board from the International Space Station. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and Godspeed to Bob and Doug.
All right, thank you, Gary. If you are just now joining us, you picked a really good time, because we are 1 hour, 8 minutes and counting away from launch. And this is our coverage for this mission known as Demonstration Mission 2, or Demo 2. Liftoff time still holding for 4:33 p.m. Eastern, tracking no issues with Falcon 9 or Dragon, and we're still waiting for that weather to hopefully cooperate. We're still tracking a few things like precipitation and flight through clouds. We're hoping that clears within the next 20 minutes or so. Over the last 3 hours, our crew members, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, donned their SpaceX suits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room and made their way out to Launch Pad 39A. They walked out of the crew quarters building just as every astronaut to fly from this spaceport has done since Apollo 7. They were transported to the pad where the crew now on board the Crew Dragon spacecraft, and we're continuing to get views of them inside that cabin live.
Today is a historic launch. It will be the first time a commercially built spacecraft will launch people into orbit, and the first time since the U.S. has sent people to the space station from American soil since 2011 with the retirement of the Space Shuttle program. Over the next hour, we will conduct a series of polls to get ready for launch, have Bob and Doug arm the launch escape system, and begin fueling Falcon 9. Launch is set for 4:33 p.m. Eastern. This will include a 12-minute flight to orbit and then a 19-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow.
Today's mission is the culmination of years of work between the teams at SpaceX and at NASA. Demo 2 is going to be an end-to-end flight test. We're going to start with launch today, go all the way to docking with the space station, and then when Bob and Doug come home, splashing down in the Atlantic. And this is going to be the final test for NASA to certify SpaceX for regular crew flights to the space station.
And we've been hearing a little from the crew on board Dragon, which they are currently strapped into their seats, as you can see on your right screen. They're already through their seats, or they've already been strapped into their seats, and through communications and leak checks, they're able to follow all the milestones still ahead on those displays just above them that you can see there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to equalize the pressures in the common manifolds just to raise them a little bit. So we will be momentarily cycling the tank isolation valves. I just wanted to let you know for awareness.
Just wanted to take a pause to listen into the nets.
Okay, we appreciate that, Jay.
So they'll be getting insight into all of the Dragon and Falcon 9 systems as we proceed towards launch. at T-minus 1 hour and 7 minutes. Let's check in with John Insprucker for a status update on both of those vehicles. What's the update, John?
Well, the good news is we've had a smooth countdown this afternoon. SpaceX team is working no technical issues on either the Falcon 9 or the Dragon spacecraft. For the Falcon 9, operators have they're actually still in work. They're going to complete in a few minutes propulsion checkouts that are being done on both the first and second stages. The team will be assessing their launch readiness with a final go, no-go poll. That'll come at T-minus 45 minutes, and that'll be followed by propellant loading starting at T-minus 35 minutes. Now, earlier today, Dragon operators performed a series of checkouts of Dragon's flight systems. The spacecraft is also currently go for launch. Our NASA crew, astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, that you can see inside the Dragon capsule on the right-hand side of the display, they are currently going through the various screens, simple checks. Their hatch is closed, suit leak checks are complete, comp checks are good. The next major event for Dragon is going to be retract of the crew access arm that you can see on the left monitor up alongside the Dragon capsule. That's going to happen somewhere between 45 and 42 minutes before liftoff. Now, the big one right now is the range. The range is currently red for launch from historic Pad 39A. Now, the air and the sea space is clear, and the worldwide network of ground stations, as well as the tracking and data relay satellites, they are ready to support Dragon as it heads into orbit. But the range is red for the weather. We recently did clear, we went green for lightning, but we are still violating several constraints. Rain, cumulus crowds, field mills, which is essentially you can tell that the atmosphere is energized around the launch site. We are expecting that we'll possibly clear that. We're going to hear a weather briefing at 1 hour with the expectation that those conditions may clear shortly afterwards and allow us to move into propellant loading. Also, we've been releasing balloons. What we're seeing at the upper altitudes is conditions look good for Falcon 9 with Dragon. No concerns have been expressed by the GNC guidance team right now. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window at 4:33:35 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, or just past 33 minutes after the upcoming hour. So we get one chance at it today. But currently, T-minus 1 hour and 3 minutes, just passing that. Falcon 9, Dragon are go. The range is ready to support, but now we're waiting on the weather as we've been expecting all afternoon.
Thanks, John. We've got an extensive history now of flying Falcon 9 from the Florida coast, and just last year completed a test run of the mission that we're less than an hour from beginning here today.
The purpose of that mission was to demonstrate Dragon's capability to safely and reliably fly to and from the International Space Station. The success of Demo 1 was a really exciting moment, and it paved the way for today's mission, where we are just moments away, hopefully if we get that weather, from flying U.S. astronauts from U.S. soil for the first time since 2011.
Dragon and Falcon 9 together have years of operational experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. As I mentioned earlier, SpaceX has successfully completed 21 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, including 20 trips to the International Space Station. Not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
Much of what was learned with the cargo Dragon was leveraged in the design of this vehicle.
Cycling is complete, expected behavior, and wanted to hear if you were able to hear those.
We actually did, Jay. We were just making a comment about that. I heard some clicking, and Bob watched it on the systems display, so absolutely.
Copy all.
And that again right there, that's the crew talking to the core here in Hawthorne, California, who's going to be talking to them throughout their ascent uphill today. So they were just doing a quick checkout. Bob and Doug confirmed they were able to hear it. Sounds like everything's still good, so still no issues with Falcon or Dragon.
can see. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft, unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our...
We're going to hear them report to the Corps that they are go for launch. Continuing to walk you through the Dragon spacecraft, opposite of that nose cone is the trunk. We can see it on the left-hand screen there, where it's kind of split right down the middle with the left side black and the right side white. The trunk provides an attachment point to Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and can carry any cargo uphill. On the outside, one half of the trunk contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system into space using SpaceX's new Pica tiling technology. The other half contains solar cells that are used to charge the spacecraft's batteries during flight.
SpaceX Dragon, Bob and I are go for launch.
And you heard that call out right
Copy,
there?
Go for launch. Next up will be the go, no go pull at T-minus 45.
Bob and Doug are go for launch, and
Hey,
next
copy.
up...
We're holding in step 6.5.
You're hearing it live from the nets. This is amazing, very exciting. The spacecraft is designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. The seats are made of carbon fiber and will be custom sized for any crew members flying on board.
That control panel that's centered between the pilot and commander seats consists of 3 touchscreen displays, and that just again allows the crew to operate the vehicle and fly it manually, but also look at all of their procedures, relative position over the Earth, the space station, any alarms, alerts, anything that they could possibly want to do on Dragon is through those touchscreens.
And lastly, our Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Crew Dragon, giving the crew the ability to safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
And that launch escape system was put into work a little bit earlier this year, again on that in-flight abort test. As we look to the future beyond this test flight, the first operational SpaceX crewed mission for NASA will be a little bit later this year after Bob and Doug come home. NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker, and Soichi Noguchi of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, were chosen to support this mission, being called Crew 1.
But today, Doug Hurley is the spacecraft commander for this mission. He previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions as the pilot on STS-127 and STS-135, which was the final space shuttle flight. Here's a closer look at Doug Hurley.
Please review your launch commit criteria. Again, this is to review and confirm a violation of launch commit criteria. We are tracking one issue with weather still. And I think we'll need to track that all the way down to launch to clear that. This will also go for arming and launch escape system and go for propellant load.
And this is the on Countdown Net reporting that the technical poll is completed. All systems are proceeding. We're monitoring the weather as LD briefed. We're also looking at a watch item on a hydraulics QD rod ring. Ring pressure will come up at -8 minutes 30 seconds, and we'll be able to verify decay rate. No concerns at this time. Everything's reading nominal, but watching that item. No other constraints on Falcon 9 or ground systems.
Stage 2 RP1 bleed is complete.
All right, we just crossed the 55-minute mark away from launch. Sitting right next to Doug Hurley, who's closest to your screen, is NASA astronaut Bob Behnken. He is the Joint Operations Commander for Demo 2, and Bankin previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions, STS-123 and STS-130, and also served a tour as Chief of the Astronaut Office. So here's a little bit more about the man who said testing out a brand new spacecraft is an astronaut's dream.
When you go through the launch day preparations, there's a lot of moments that kind of stand out to you. One is the kind of the celebratory piece of it, which is that you're walking out of the suit up room and getting in the vehicle that's going to take you to the launch pad. When you close the hatch, that's really when Doug and I are in the vehicle, and it's our vehicle, and we're really in control of the mission at that point.
Test pilots, their task proved that man could fly into orbit around the Earth and return live and well to talk about it.
There's always a balance of managing risk as you go forward to execute a test point and figuring out a way to collect the data. We hear a sound. Okay, is that sound an expected sound? Or we see a light, is that light an expected light? What's the source of it? Does it sync up with something else that's going on or not? So trying to dissect all of that in real time in your head is, a lot of things happen like that on launching of a vehicle.
From St. Anne, Missouri, he is an Air Force colonel and flight test engineer. He flew aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour twice. Introducing NASA astronaut Bob Bankin.
My career at NASA has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000. Went through the training program, primarily focused on the space shuttle and the International Space Station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, the second time was definitely different than the first time. You can feel a little bit guilty of, hey, should I study one more thing, or is there one more piece of information I should get? Am I really prepared or not? So that's definitely different between where I was on my first flight and where I'm at right now. It's been really interesting, I think, for both my wife and I to have gone through the process of seeing each other launch in space. I've seen her take that risk and had it be in front of her, and I've done that to her. And there's just something different about watching a rocket launch when there are people on board. You feel a little bit differently about the pit of your stomach, and I can only tell you it's multiplied significantly when it's somebody that you know, and then somebody, of course, that's a family member. It's even multiplied more.
For me personally, as a spouse, watching everything that Bob has put into this over the last 5 years, the dedication that he's shown, the perseverance is pretty special. For both of us, though, the way our minds work, it won't be until sort of the mission is complete that you have really a chance to savor it and celebrate it. This is a huge accomplishment for an Air Force flight test engineer to be part of the demonstration mission of a brand new vehicle. It's going to be amazing.
Without a partner that has that same appreciation, I think it can be challenging for some folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that takes away from family that that my spouse appreciates, and I love her for that. Really, my role on the Demo 2 mission is to make sure that we get this vehicle tested and evaluated so that we can move on to more operational missions at the International Space Station. We've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team, helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this. Now there's another capability in the U.S. besides NASA to operate something of this magnitude. When is the last time humans launched on a new vehicle? Certainly on the American side, it's been several decades. Now we're in a time when we've got multiple vehicles under development. It's a great time from a space exploration time frame just to see all that happening, and it's because of this nurturing of the environment, being able to pull in a wider group of people who can contribute towards human spaceflight. It's a super cool time. On a deeply personal level, I'm really excited that my son is get a chance to see me launch into space. Being an astronaut has been a little bit of an abstraction thing for him because he's seen me do it in old videos, but he hasn't seen me do it for real. And so I'm excited for him to see this launch. I want to thank the entire Commercial Crew Program team that's worked together to get to this point where we've got vehicles in the launch pad ready to head to the International Space Station.
We're just over 49.5 minutes away from launch of the Falcon 9 carrying Dragon to the space station. Right now, the launch director and the launch team are preparing for a readiness for launch poll. In this poll, the 13 members of the launch team will electronically indicate a go for launch. This is also the go for propellant load. Now, we're going to hear that in a couple of minutes, so while we wait, we are tracking you watching from all over the country. We're seeing large numbers of you logging on or tuning in from coast to coast, as well as around the world. We want to know, is this your first time watching a launch live? If not, how many have you seen before? Tell us using the hashtag LaunchAmerica from your favorite social media website. As for me, this isn't my first one. I've seen a lot, but everyone is exciting. Now, coming up, we're going to go into a readiness poll, as I mentioned. Currently, right now, on other nets, the SpaceX launch director is checking to verify the Dragon team is ready and that the NASA launch management team is ready. They'll come back at about T-minus 47 minutes with instructions to the SpaceX Falcon 9 team to make their final assessments. Then they log into the procedure. It's a little different than the old days where you would hear a go, 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 you know, position by position, all up and down the row. In this electronic age, everybody just clicks on whether they're go or no go. The launch director will then, at T-minus 45 minutes, summarize the end of the poll and will then provide instructions for the team. At the same time, we will begin getting ready for the crew access arm retraction, and we'll show you that on one of the screens that we've got up. Now, currently, we are continuing to monitor the weather. The weather is still red. It is improving. We're looking at one cell between the radar and the pad. We're keeping our fingers crossed that conditions will improve, but we're going
to this point where we've got vehicles.
Right now, the launch director and the launch team are preparing for get the range green so that we can actually do the launch in just 47 minutes from now. Let's listen to the countdown net for a moment. Right now, coming up on 46 minutes, 10 seconds before launch. Didn't hear any significant chatter coming over countdown one.
Yes, launch director in the countdown net. Poll is complete, and we have a go to proceed with propellant load. Launch control, proceed with swing into crew arm. Arming crew arm movement for T-minus 45 minutes. Thank you, launch control. A reminder in control room on hold and launch escape protocol. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief CE or LD, and it will approve aborting the launch auto sequence and proceed to launch abort. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. Operators shall also advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring for Dragon manual escape flight rules. Remainder on fire alarm instructions. Here in Fire Room 4, in the event of a fire alarm, key operators, previously briefed, will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personal safety is threatened, we will evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly outside. One final reminder, we'll be arming the launch escape system momentarily. Need all personnel, please stay in your seats from now through orbit insertion and Dragon separation from the second stage.
Crew access arm retract has started.
And you've heard Mike Taylor, the SpaceX launch director, give instructions to the team.
Okay, so
We've also just heard the call. The crew access arm retraction is underway. Great view from the camera inside the White Room as we see the arm moving away from the Dragon capsule, one of the major events necessary to get down to T0. The next one coming up will be arming of the escape system on the Dragon capsule.
Does look
now,
like
right now, the next plan for Falcon 9, T-minus 35 minutes, we will begin loading propellant onto the first and second stages. Now, currently, Falcon 9's looking good. Dragon's looking good. The range continues to be go for launch in terms of the clearance around the launch pad, both the air and the sea space. Looking at the flight corridor, the ground stations, the NASA tracking and data relay satellites are ready to support. And we just continue to monitor the weather. Our team is getting constant updates. We're monitoring weather data sensors around the launch site, looking to make sure that we can get everything into the green position. The one that we're mostly looking at right now is how much rain we're going to get between now and liftoff, whether it's just going to be mild precipitation that's within the rules for loading propellant. That's what the expectation is, but we're going to continue to watch that. So fingers crossed, but right now coming up at T-minus 43 minutes, 18 seconds and counting, everything but the weather's go, and the weather is trending in the right direction. So we've got our fingers crossed here. At this time, we're going to send it back over to Kennedy Space Center as the action is picking up on the launch pad.
Thanks, John I. Now that countdown clock is continuing to tick, and we are 42 minutes and 46 seconds away from launch. Now, as you just saw, the crew arm retracted. That is the last major visual milestone before liftoff. And we should be hearing out on the net soon confirmation that the launch escape system is armed. When that happens, all 8 of the Super Draco throttle valves are opened, which means that those engines can ignite.
For section 7.
Okay. So that means those 8 throttle valves are opened, and if those Super Dracos needed to fire in order for Dragon to escape off of the pad, they could.
And so things running just a little bit ahead of schedule right now.
Field lead is complete.
Now we just saw the crew access arm retract just a minute ago. We saw NASA astronauts Doug Hurley.
In 7.2, our visors are closed and we're arming the launch escape system.
So we just heard the astronauts confirm that they are about to arm the launch escape system. That happens just before fueling begins, which we expect to happen in just a couple of minutes. We saw Bob and Doug suit up a little over 3 hours ago. Then we watched them drive out to Launch Complex 39A. They were assisted by the SpaceX ground team with Crew Dragon ingress. That happened a little before 2 o'clock this afternoon. And then we saw the spacecraft hatch close. And again, just a minute ago, we saw the crew access arm retract. We just heard that the crew armed the launch escape system. And in just a few minutes, we are going to hear the call that they have started propellant loading.
Launch escape system is verified armed.
So we just heard that verification that the launch escape system is armed.
We're switching to GN2.
And we are going to send it over to Hawthorne to take us through prop loading. Jesse?
From From the parachutes to the launch escape system, SpaceX has designed Crew Dragon and Falcon 9 to be the safest launch vehicle ever flown. And joining us today, we have SpaceX's Nick Picone, who was our mission manager for our in-flight abort mission earlier this year and currently works on the Starlink team. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Hey, Jesse. I'm here at the Launch and Landing Recovery Center with the recovery team and our Dragon ground operations team monitoring the launch.
Awesome. Can you tell us more about the critical safety features on this new version of Dragon?
Sure. So Dragon 2 was designed with long-term reuse and reliability in mind. So fundamentally, there are multiple layers of redundancy to any of the failure modes that we could conceive. Push us outside of our design space. Dragon also has backup systems and operational controls intended to keep Bob and Doug safe. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it today, but the launch escape system is the primary backup system that we have from the moment that the vehicle is here on pad being fueled all the way up until orbital insertion. At a high level, the launch escape system, in the event of a major Falcon anomaly or emergency, will terminate Falcon thrust, separate Dragon from Falcon, and it'll use Dragon's 8 Super Draco engines to quickly pull the vehicle away from any kind of Falcon anomaly.
And you talked a lot about the launch escape system. How exactly is that activated? Is it autonomous? Is it manually activated?
Definitely. So for this system to work as designed, you have to remember that the vehicle could be flying at hundreds or thousands of miles an hour. Launch director and chief engineer, who you've heard a lot from today, are capable of sending a manual command to Dragon to initiate a launch escape. And Bob and Doug are also always able to actuate the launch escape handle and initiate a launch escape themselves as well. Now that the system is armed, all of this is currently active on the vehicle.
Wow, it sounds like there's a lot that goes into it. And we did have an in-flight abort test earlier this year to test this out. Can you tell us what we learned from that test?
Definitely. It was possibly the most flight-like test of an orbital-class booster in history. It was a fully flight-like test using a full Falcon 9 rocket, which we had to knowingly destroy in order to get this fully integrated system. For folks who didn't get a chance to see it, the vehicle followed a normal crew launch trajectory about a minute and a half into flight. We had Dragon autonomously trigger the launch escape system based on a reconfiguration of those triggers I was just talking about.
For propellant load.
Thankfully, we had we continued through flight, had a successful parachute deployment and splashdown, and we did see Falcon rather spectacularly blow up about 10 seconds after separation. It's important to recognize that all of that happens from command to actual separation of the vehicle in under half a second.
Wow, yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us and talking through those details with us. Enjoy the launch today. So we're going to send it back to KSC with Lauren.
Thank you, Jesse. We are about a minute and a half away from propellant load. At T-minus 35 minutes, we should hear the call out on the nets that propellant load has started. So that's about a minute and 13 seconds away.
Hey, Marie and Lauren, I am lost an engine. Where will we go next when the different abort calls around the country and around the world? So I think that's what those guys are probably thinking about now, and just really getting ready for this
propellant loading to start. Again, that's fueling of the rocket.
All right, we're getting close. We should hear that call out any second now on the nets. So let's listen in.
Propellant load has started.
Fantastic. So prop load has started. We've started loading liquid oxygen on stage 1 and stage 2. And yeah, liquid oxygen and RP1, which is our rocket grade kerosene. So now that we are 34 minutes and 42 seconds away from the first launch of astronauts into orbit from American soil since 2011, we know that the launch escape system is armed, which happened just before fueling. Dragon prop load happened weeks ago, actually just a few miles down the road at what we call Dragon Land. And those propellants, which are MMH or monomethylhydrazine, that's our fuel, and NTO or nitrogen tetroxide, that's our oxidizer. Those not only feed the Draco engines that propel Dragon on orbit, but they also supply those 8 Super Draco engines of the launch escape system. So I have one right here, a little model. Oh, it doesn't come off the stand.
Don't break it, Lauren.
All right, I know, it's very nice. So as you can see, Dragon is actually broken up into 4 quads, and each quad has 2 of the Super Draco engines for a total of 8 of them. And as I mentioned, they are biprop engines. They have MMH and NTO as their oxidizer. Abort system. Escape system is actually integrated into the vehicle, and that's great for a couple of reasons. One less thing you have to jettison on a nominal flight, and so they're pretty dormant, just those throttle valves open unless they're used, and hopefully they never have to be. And yeah, I mean, the other thing that offers you is the ability to escape from the pad all the way to orbit, because if you jettisoned your escape system prior to that, you couldn't. So yeah.
The launch escape system is armed. That protects Bob and Doug so that if something were to go wrong, they can shoot off of the pad away from the rocket and parachute to safety in the ocean. That is such a crucial safety capability. And so now we want to go over to Hawthorne for an operational update with John.
Thanks, Marie. We are counting down those final minutes. Everything is still looking good on the Falcon 9 and the Dragon vehicles for an on-time launch, but weather is trending the wrong way right now. as the propellant is being pulled out by the Merlin turbopumps. Dragon on board the spacecraft. You can see the astronauts are monitoring systems while propellant is loaded into the Falcon 9. Now, when we flew the first demo flight last year and then the in-flight escape test earlier this year, the sounds inside the Dragon capsule were recorded. So as part of the training, the sounds of the propellant loading were played back to acclimate the crew to what they're experiencing now. I'm listening to some discussion on one of the back nets, trying to track where we are with the weather criteria. We're just passing another weather gate right now, trying to see whether or not the conditions are go. In certain situations, when the weather is no-go, you have to wait 30 minutes, and we are now inside of 30 minutes. But if the cloud moves away, if the conditions improve, we may be able to continue the countdown for another 14 minutes and reassess. So we're waiting to see whether or not we can continue the count. Currently we are. The range, they're ready to support with no problems in the air and the sea space area. But again, the weather, that's the one that's looking bad, and we're going to continue to listen. And as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch time. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we're going to have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity on May 30th.
For Demo 2, Bob and Doug's flight to station will take about 19 hours, and their journey is fairly similar to the trip our cargo Dragon makes back and forth to the International Space Station, with two noticeable differences: docking and splashdown.
As we await T-minus 0 and just a little over 28 minutes from now, ground operations teams just doing those final series of system checks, making sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for liftoff, and really keeping an eye on that weather. And you're just continuing to get live views of the teams. You've got Falcon 9 and Dragon on your left, and then Bob and Doug on the right as they prepare at the Cape for liftoff.
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon make their ascent until Falcon 9 and first and second stages separate and send Dragon on its way to the space station.
And once it gets on orbit, mission operators will prepare Dragon for on-orbit operations, where Dragon will execute a series of burns that are going to gradually raise its orbit to align more closely with the International Space Station. And you're seeing some of that track in the animation on your screen right now. After doing enough of those burns, they'll put Dragon. Oh, sounds like we're going to get a weather update real quick for the crew.
Go ahead, Spacer.
Yeah, we're currently just evaluating a constraint on the field mill rule, which looks at lightning energy dissipation. We expect to have an update at about T-minus 20, and more information there on whether we would be able to continue into the prop load or scrub at that time.
Okay, Jay, thanks for the update. We appreciate it.
Copy. So I'll give you some more words in about 6 minutes.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to find out in about 6 minutes if we're going to have enough time. And John, I was referring to a couple of those weather situations where we have to have a certain amount of time. In this case, with the field mills, about 15 minutes. So they have until about 16 minutes and 30 seconds to really make sure that we're going to have enough time for that to dissipate. So we're going to be listening for that weather update in just a couple of minutes, but it is going to be a pretty interesting trip uphill for them once they actually get on orbit.
And a very exciting countdown with 6 minutes to figure out if we are launching today. But targeting back to what we were talking about, next Dragon will make its approach and actually dock with the space station. This is a very different process from what we've seen with Dragon cargo deliveries in the past, which used a process called berthing. Now, berthing requires a spacecraft to approach the station and then stop so a crew member can maneuver the station's robotic arm to capture the spacecraft. Docking on this version of Dragon can be done autonomously.
Stage 2 cryo-helium load started.
Autonomously with no crew aboard the station. It's typically a faster process, both when arriving and leaving, but it does still require pinpoint accuracy to approach safely.
Once captured, a spacecraft then gets attached to a common berthing mechanism. It's the same type of port that we use to connect each of the modules together on board station. It's a little bit slower process than docking, but the hatches are significantly larger than docking ports, which makes them perfect for bringing up large cargo items.
Dragon will spend up to 120 days docked before preparing to return home. Following successful completion of Dragon's test objectives and cargo loading operations, the crew will close out the cabin, perform final system checks, and configure the vehicle for undocking. Once the automated undocking sequence is complete, Dragon will complete 2 departure burns using its Draco engines, pushing it away from the space station.
Closing that nose cone again, executing a deorbit burn, and once they're inside the atmosphere, deploying drogue and then main parachutes, and then finally splashing down off the Florida coast, at which teams will move in, get Bob and Doug up out of the water, and get them out of the capsule once they're on the boat. So we have
I know.
And so, we want to be safe. We want to be safe for our families, and we'll, do this another day if it doesn't work with the weather.
I love that John I always says weather. It's that thing that everybody talks about, but no one can do anything about it.
I know.
And it is this interesting thing of just, succumbing to Mother Earth. She's going to tell us if we can go or not today.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if it happens, I mean, look at it this way. Bob and Doug got one really great rehearsal in, right?
It's always best to practice and practice and practice, yes.
So again, we're less than 2 minutes now from that weather update that is going to go directly to Bob and Doug, and we will quiet down so we can listen in for that, because I know we can't wait to find out what that is. And those of you watching that have been following along, we are eagerly awaiting to hear whether the weather is going to be a showstopper today.
These clouds can seem really deceiving at times, right? You see the blue skies peeking through and you think everything's fine, but you just don't know. That's why we have those launch weather officers.
Absolutely. And I know, we've talked about it before, but it's not just the weather in Florida that they're looking at. They've got to look at weather downrange. If they were to have an abort in flight and they needed to come down somewhere in the ocean, they need to consider what the weather's like out there, because recovery teams have to go out and get them in a situation like that. So there's so many variables, and that's why not just with this flight, but with every human space flight we've had in the past, there's always a very good chance of a scrub, because you do have so much criteria that you have to meet. And we're going to listen in now. We're just seconds away from a weather update.
Stage 2, RP1 load complete.
That is liquid oxygen you see venting off the rocket. That's completely normal and expected. We're standing by for a weather update.
Unless you can give us another 10 minutes, I don't think we're going to get there with any of the rules today.
Reds on low dwellings in the city.
I mean, another 10 minutes past T0.
Oh,
1645 local. I think we'll probably be clear on all the rules, but not quite going to make it for this.
Okay. We're going to check back in with you in about 2 minutes, and then I'll call it up at about T-minus 17 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, there's some of them are starting to count down, but we still have one above 2,000. So if that gets below,
One second.
That is also stopped. We now proceed into what is a normal scrub sequence for us. We practice this every launch. So now we move into safely taking the propellants, the pressurization gases back off the first and second stages. As things get into a safe configuration, then we will disarm the escape system on Dragon, and we'll bring the crew access arm back around the spacecraft. So right now, we got down to just inside 17 minutes. The hardware was working very well on both Dragon and spacecraft. We had the fuel loading going on. We had liquid oxygen loading going on, everything but second stage. And the weather just needed a little bit more time to clear the conditions. We didn't have that time because we had an instantaneous window. And so with that, SpaceX launch director had to call upon the input from weather,
Dragon,
had to
all about
call
30
a
minutes.
scrub
Thank
for
you,
the
bye.
day per the safety rules that we have for this flight. So right now the team is undergoing the post-scrub operations on both Dragon as well as Falcon 9, working with the range. No issues being reported right now as we start to go through that sequence. Everything looks good. And Dan, we had a good webcast going here until the very end. So we'll look at it as now we've had another great dry rehearsal. Last Saturday we did a dry one, I should say, and today we've done a wet dress rehearsal. But sorry, we just couldn't get there, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, John and obviously we can't control the weather. We came right down to the wire there, hoping we could just squeeze in between those cloud systems to get a launch today, but it wasn't to be. But it doesn't mean we're done. We're going to have another attempt coming up in just 3 days, so we're going to be doing this all over again essentially on Saturday on the 30th, and that launch attempt is going to be coming at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time, so a little bit earlier in the day. It's going to look largely the same to everything that we saw today, with the crew waking up, going through suit up, making their way to the pad. So we're going to feel a lot of deja vu, I think, on Saturday.
Yep. But still exciting. Safety is always first, so if weather was not there for us today, hopefully Saturday it will be there for us and we will have a safe launch on Saturday.
Yeah, the initial weather report still had us at about, I think, a 40% possibility of violation. So weather a little bit better, but we're still going to be kind of rolling the dice. It is Florida in the spring and summer, so storms are always a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
One of the good things, though, the vehicle appeared to be in great health throughout the day, both Dragon and Falcon 9, so we didn't have to scrub for any technical issue. We're going to continue and follow along with Bob and Doug until they're out of that capsule, as, again, they had started loading fuel onto the Falcon 9 rocket, so they'll have to wait until all that fuel comes off. They'll disarm the launch escape system, which still stays armed because they're still sitting on a partially loaded rocket, and then once they're able to disarm that launch escape system, the crew arm will swing back out. They'll make their way once again back the way they came, and then it'll be back to crew quarters for Bob and Doug for a few more days.
Oh. Bob and Doug.
But if you're just now tuning in, wondering why we're not still counting down, we did have a launch scrub today. Just a little under 17 minutes.
Bro,
look at this guy.
For offload. Expecting about a 40-minute offload time.
So that call out, the LOX, the liquid oxygen fuel pumping out of the first stage of the Falcon 9, everything looking good with that. Expecting about 40 minutes for all that fuel to come off. So again, once that fuel comes off, Bob and Doug will be able to disarm the launch escape system, and that crew access arm will swing back out. They'll be able to make their way back down and then over to crew quarters. So unfortunate scrub today because of weather. That was the one thing we were tracking from the moment we started today, watching Bob and Doug get suited up for their launch. We did abort today's launch, or scrub today's launch, with a little under 17 minutes to go until our T0 time, which was 4:33. So that's going to move us to our next attempt, which is coming up on Saturday. And that time is going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time, so a little bit earlier in the day for Bob and Doug and for everybody else watching around the world. They're still going to have an 18-hour flight to station if that's when we launch. And a lot of the stuff that we saw today is going to look very similar, but we're just going to have to try again, cross our fingers, hope for a little bit better weather the next time.
And again, this goes with
YouTube
every launch.
expert
We do
haters
track
love.
everything all the way down to
Love
T0
your
to
couch
make
is that.
sure that everything is go, making sure that the range is
Grizzly
go,
Adams.
weather is go.
Oh,
So this is
good grief.
standard procedure. We always tend to make sure that we have a backup
Ooh,
day, launch
look
day,
at this
in
guy.
case we do have scrubs
Blame
like
the
today.
uncontrollable variables like
So
the
this
weather.
this is pretty
Dot,
normal
dot,
and
dot,
standard.
not NASA.
Nothing to be worried
I don't
about.
know, Tyler
Again,
Schott.
we do this
I
for the
think that's
safety
exactly
of
what
our
NASA would
vehicles,
do.
as well as today we had astronauts on our vehicle. So even bigger reason for us to make sure that we have safe weather for them to fly.
And just a reminder for everyone still tuned in, it takes about 40 minutes for all of this propellant to come
Again,
off
guys,
of the
I'm
Falcon
sorry
9.
for my terrible
And
stream
while
quality.
it is
It's
offloading that
absolute
launch
trash.
escape system
I know
on
that.
Dragon, which is designed to pull the capsule away if there's any issue with the rocket or anything on the pad, that is still armed. So we're going to continue to stay with this until all the propellant's off, and then we'll see the launch escape system get disarmed. Bob and Doug will be able to
I
open up
literally
their visors
just
again.
discovered that I've
The
been like
launch,
duplicately recording my
crew
audio,
access arm will swing
where
back
it makes
out
me sound
and link
like,
up with Dragon, and they'll make their
like
way
a
off and then
duplicate
down
zombie.
the tower at
So
the pad.
that's my bad.
But if you're just now tuning in, no launch today. We did have to scrub because of weather. We're going to be moving to our second attempt on Saturday, just a little bit earlier in the afternoon. Just going to continue to stand by as this propellant comes off. We heard a call that
All right,
everything
let's
was
see
going
what the chat
nominally
is
or
saying.
as expected so far. And then once all the propellants
we got,
off, we should see Bob and Doug make their way
Bob
out of
and
Dragon
Doug
shortly
sitting
after.
on top of a loaded rocket. Bro, Bob and Doug. What kind of retard? Like, how could you make it any worse? Like, are you trying to make your quote-unquote heroes sound like retards? And it's not like they're just casually dropping. You know, it's
And
a
what
Bob
you're
and Doug.
seeing on your
It's like
screen is a
once
live
in the
view
entire
of Bob and
broadcast, if
Doug
you
on
wanted
the
to
right side
personalize
inside of
the
Dragon
heroes of
as
the
they're
story,
waiting
you could
for
say, like,
propellant
yeah, you know, it's just Bob
to
and Doug.
be
It's
removed
not
from the
just
vehicle so that it is
Mr.
safe for them to
Professor
disarm
Bob,
the launch
Professor
escape
Bob
system.
Dogginson, and Dr. Doug Shlomo Shackleton.
And this will take
Bro, they're
a
constantly
bit of time,
reiterating.
so we are going
every
to stay
3
live
minutes,
with you
every 3.33
to watch
minutes,
this
they're reiterating.
as
it's
they
just Bob and Doug.
exit the
It's
vehicle
just your guy
eventually
down the street.
and come
It's
down
fucking
from standing down
It's
on
that-
launch today.
It's that dum-dum pill, that big old dum-dum pill, you know?
Up until
We
the
got
point of the
Leinster,
scrub, we had a really
gonna
clean
need more
countdown.
poppers.
Weren't
That's
tracking
true,
any
man. These
issues
guys
with
are
Falcon
drugged
9
out
or
of
the
their
Dragon
mind.
spacecraft.
I swear to
so
God, that's my
always a
opinion.
good thing to see.
A lot of
We
people
did have to
don't
scrub
think that
because
that's
of
the
that
case.
weather. To be a little bit more
It's kind of
specific,
like, even
we
in the
were
flat
still
Earth
in
community,
violation
people
of
think
one
that
of the
that's
weather
weird.
criteria. It was
People
the
have all
strength
kinds
of
of
electric
theories about,
fields in the
no,
atmosphere
astronauts
that
are just
the
dolls,
45th Space
you
Wing
know,
and other
they're
weather
just in on it,
operators
they're
are monitoring
33-degree
around the launch
Freemasons, all
pad.
in on it.
And
I think
that's one of those rules
these
where we need a
guys that
certain
we're
amount
viewing
of
the stream
time
at, I
if
think
we're in a
they're
violation in this
blasted
case.
out on
roughly
fucking
50%
drugs. I
on
think
stage 1 LOX and fuel.
what's in front of them
85% on
is a
stage 2
fucking
fuel.
green screen where they're probably
So the propellant
seeing like
offload on
some
Falcon 9
fucking,
continuing to go
some
well.
of the relatives.
But we needed a little bit more
and they're
time if we
blasted
were going to be
out
able to
on, like,
clear
fucking LSD
that launch weather
or
constraint.
cocaine, and they
And
think
since we
that
do have an
they're,
instantaneous launch
communicating
window
to some of
today,
these people,
we weren't able to make
or
it.
they're
So
just seeing
we hope for
crazy
better
reports.
weather
That's why
coming
they're
up on
acting
Saturday.
and I
where
think
again,
the
our
audio
next
is
launch attempt is going to be
completely
at 3:22 p.m.
dubbed.
Eastern
But then
time,
again,
and
I'm
we'll
a bit
be able to go
weirdo.
through everything. I mean, we saw them get suited up. They had a great ride out to the pad.
We got
all of their initial
Happy
checks on
Whippers
both the
saying
suits with
they're
pressure checks and
professionals,
communication
laying on
checks
their
went
backs
well.
with their head
Able
up
to get
thing
the
and
Dragon
their
hatch
handbags.
closed, the launch escape system arm, and Falcon 9 started its fueling.
Exactly.
Just not
Well,
able
what do
to
you mean
make
by
a good weather
handbags?
window
I'm
today.
not sure what that means to you.
And as John I said earlier, it was
Swaber
just
goes,
another
"I'd make
great
him stay
rehearsal
here till
today.
next attempt."
I don't think
Right,
you can
right.
get
Yeah, just-
enough practice
Dude,
doing
I
this.
wouldn't
So
put it past them. I
when
wouldn't put it
Saturday
past
comes, or
them to
when
just-
the day that we can
that's the
actually launch the
strategy is to-
vehicle,
they're
Bob
actually
and
breaking
Doug
it down.
and
I wouldn't
the
put it
NASA
past
and
them to-
SpaceX
that
team
they're just
are
gonna let
fully
these people sit
prepared
here.
with
Bro, I
just
swear
an
to God.
extra rehearsal
You've
on the
seen
belt
that
now.
image, right? There's that
And
picture
as
of the
we had
NASA
talked a
astronauts
couple of
and you
times
see the
throughout our
reflections
countdown, the weather is a lot more complex when we're launching humans. You have some more stringent.
I mean, you don't know what's
in
going
place,
on.
not only around the pad, but in the case of this launch today, we were also looking at whether
my
the
take
entire
on it is
ascent
that,
corridor,
you know,
as we
this
call
is
it,
a
so
giant
basically the
corporation
entire
trying to lie
way
to a
that they
mass
were
amount of
flying
people.
up the east coast of the
We
United
can-
States in this
we
launch
can-
today.
we can
We're
take
monitoring
joy
that weather
in
because those are
laughing at
areas
the
that if they
cloud
have
circus.
an ascent abort or basically Dragon firing off of the Falcon 9 while they're flying into space, we have to make sure that conditions are good in the sea states around those areas, just so they're not going to be landing in the middle of a hurricane, which we did have a tropical storm forming right off the coast of South Carolina today, just to help complicate things a little bit.
And people might be asking if we knew the weather was going to be a little iffy today, why continue to count down? Well, that is the reason why we do all these checks all the way to countdown. In Florida, the weather is pretty sporadic. Sometimes a thunderstorm or hurricane will pass through. Within 20 minutes, it's gone, and we could have clear skies for a safe launch.
Even though I'm against NASA and I'm a flat earther,
we continued as scheduled.
I still respect
standard
this guy
procedure again to just continue to monitor weather all the way down to the last minutes of the count.
Supposedly
we see what happens. So today, unfortunately, we did scrub for weather, but we will attempt again this Saturday on May 30th.
He understood the lies of NASA, and then he joined SpaceX because he thought that.
And Dan, Jesse, a couple of things to add on there.
So again, I
right
just
now
want to give
we
a
are
personal shout out.
11 minutes after the scrub was called.
I really respect him.
Liquid oxygen
for
and
being
fuel
the,
coming off of the first stage.
The spokesperson for NASA.
Hard to tell from the view. It's still a little misty.
And it
around
always
the tank
comforts
there's
me,
locks on board.
listening to the SpaceX
but we're between half and a third of each of the fuel and LOX tanks filled on the first stage.
It makes me feel like warm
propellant coming out right per plan.
Where I know that
the second stage fuel tank is offloading. That's going slower, but it's also a smaller tank. It doesn't take very long to either load it or to
thanks
offload
everyone
it.
for hanging out.
The other thing that we're working on is the high-pressure helium spheres, as well as the
I honestly
nitrogen
didn't
spheres for
suspect
the
that
landing
they
leg
would
system.
cancel a launch.
The pressure will be brought down on those, eventually getting it down low enough to where people can re-enter the pad area. So right now the team is preparing, once they get permission, the SpaceX
but for
egress
thank you everyone.
technician team
Thank you for the donations.
will come back inside the
see you next time.
caution area around the